think we can start. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Despina Tomadaki, and I'm a Principal Advisor in the Lending Operations Department of the European Investment Bank. I would like to thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity today to discuss the interplay between impact investing and the creative economy. We have the honor to have here with us today two of the most prominent ladies in the sector, both leading organizations at the intersection of impact investing and the creative economy. Ms. Laura Callanan, welcome, and Ms. Fran Sanderson, welcome. So, Ms. Laura Callanan is the founding partner of the Upstart Co-Lab based in New York City. Before launching Upstart Co-Lab back in 2016, Laura was Senior Deputy Chair of the National Endowment for the Arts. Previously, Laura was a leader in McKinsey & Company's social innovation practice, Executive Director of the Prosper Hill Foundation, and Associate Director of the Rockefeller Foundation, where she managed an amazing $3 billion endowment and co-led impact investing. Welcome again. Ms. Francesca Sanderson, Fran is currently the Director of the Arts and Culture Programs and Investments at Nesta, the UK's Innovation Foundation, and will shortly transition to becoming the CEO of Figurative, an independent, non-for-profit spin-out of Nesta that will focus on development, supporting new business, while at the same time creating models for impact and funding investments in the culture and creative sector. So welcome both. Thank you so much for being here. So both Laura and Fran worked together on a collaborative project called Creativity, Culture and Capital, producing a report that illustrates how the creative sector delivers social and environmental impact, and how impact investors are financing a more just and a more sustainable global creative economy. So let me start with Laura. Laura, how would you define impact investing in the framework of the creative economy? And what actually makes it different from impact investing in other sectors?
So the definition of impact investing, I don't think changes when you bring this tool and this type of capital to the context of the creative economy. The definition of impact investing is investing, proper investing. It's not philanthropy, it's not grants or gifts or donations. These are investments. They can be equity, they can be debt, but they are seeking a financial return. They are also seeking, in addition to a financial return, some sort of positive impact, whether it's environmental or social. And I think it's very important as we bring forward this conversation about impact investing in the creative economy, that we follow the rules, that we stick to the definition of impact investing that the impact investors have been familiar with and building towards over the past 25 years. What's different is us scoping the creative economy in a way that will make sense to impact investors. When I started Upstart CoLab and I began to talk about impact investing in the creative economy, I would get a whole range of questions. Why is buying a Picasso painting an impact investment, was one question. And I said, I don't think it is. How can you invest in a ballerina? And I said, I don't think you can. But what you can do is think about investing in businesses that are in industries like fashion and film and TV and video games and food. And impact investors know how to invest in businesses, and they can bring the same criteria and the same aspirations to those types of investments. So while I think the definition of impact investing remains the same when you bring it into the context of a conversation about the creative economy, I think it's very important when you bring the creative economy as a new theme or a topic to impact investors, you do it in terms that they can understand. Not investing in creativity as a mindset or creativity as a skill set, but creativity through industries and the businesses that make up those industries.
Thank you. Fran, what is the concrete impact that is generated by investing in the creative economy, and how can it actually be measured?
Thanks, Despina, and thank you for having me here today, and it's an honour to share the stage with Laura always. So I thought about this, and we had a little back and forth about concrete impact and whether I wanted to answer that question in particular. And I thought, actually, I will, because I think the phrasing really brings out one of the questions, which is that, if you look at the broader impact investing market economy, there are areas in which, say, healthcare or education, where the impact metrics might be more obvious, more clear. And I think from our perspective, we would look at organizations who might be generating impact in a recognized way, so economic growth, for example, skills, jobs, education outcomes, health outcomes, but also because the creative economy is very kind of intersectional and it's interwoven and it acts in many areas, there are kind of diffuse benefits, and there are also ways in which those benefits will interact with each other. So for me, if we look at our investments and we only talk about the outcomes as they're recognized in sectors already, that runs the risk of being reductive. So while we can talk about some of our investments and the impacts that they have generated in ways that are recognizable to impact investors, I want to kind of be careful to add that there is something on top of that. So really there are a lot of benefits that are generated. If we think about culture in the pandemic and the impact it's had on societies, we need to make sure that those impacts aren't lost when we're talking about the impact of the creative economy. I could talk a little bit about, so what we do is make debt investments into arts and culture organizations, primarily charitable, incorporated as charities, and perhaps we'll get into some of the challenges around that later. So it's been such a privilege to work with Laura over the years and learn so much from her, and it's really interesting to look at our different markets in terms of the US, which isn't a primarily public funded organisation. So you don't have something like Arts Council England, who are our main funder, who are a big public funder in the arts and support a great deal of the arts sector. So most of those would be charities. They're publicly funded, and then when you're making investments into them, a debt investment is really the only investment you can make because they can't take equity. However, there are interesting new models. So that's just a bit of background about what we do. And then thinking about how we look at impact, just to answer your question, we were led by another one of our funders, a big foundation, Esme Fairbairn Foundation, to look at how the organisation talks about its impact. So when we invest in an organisation, we will talk to them, think about what they're trying to achieve, sometimes help them with a theory of change process to articulate what their outputs and outcomes they're aiming to achieve are, and then they report back to us on those KPIs. So it's very much an investee-led process. It does obviously create a challenge for us at the portfolio level because we have lots of different organizations. They're all reporting different KPIs, and so we have a kind of basket of KPIs, and it's very hard for us to talk about it at the portfolio level. At this kind of early stage of the market, our answer to that is to talk about improvement. So we almost take a second order metric about impact, and we will say we've set these impact targets, people are meeting them, overshooting them, or not quite meeting them, and that's the metric that we can report across our portfolio. So I would say, in summary, it's an evolving field, and I think we need to be really careful as of the custodians of that conversation about how we talk about the impacts, make sure nothing is lost, make sure nothing is too top-down and dictatorial and investor-led. And so we think about what is working, really at that intersection where investors can do something for investees and vice versa. And that's the bit we need to make sure that has balance in the conversation about how we measure impact.
Sounds very challenging, I might say. Oh my God. Okay, Laura, since the launch of Upstart Collab, you have directly mobilized $23 million of impact capital for funds and companies in the creative economy, and you have created a New York State Inclusive Creative Economy Fund. So, what kind of investors have you managed to mobilize, and what is the also financial return that those investors are seeking?
Great. So just a little context on Upstart Collab. We are ourselves an NGO, and our goal is to build the ecosystem for impact investing in the creative economy throughout the United States. We approach this in three ways. making the case through research and conversation and convenings for this opportunity of what the creative economy can offer to impact investors and what impact investors can offer to the creative economy. The second thing we do is we build the coalition of impact investors who are enthusiastic about art and design and culture and heritage and creativity. Similarly, we try to unlock the capital that sits within the endowments of the museums, cultural institutions, libraries, art schools in the United States, which by our count is about $64 billion, and very little of that is currently aligned with the values of these institutions. And the third thing we seek to do is bring investable products to market and mobilize impact investment capital for the creative economy. So the good news is, you mentioned we had mobilized $23 million to our mission. We are now launching our new chapter, and to date we've mobilized $45 million to our mission, so we're very excited about that. And when you asked about what are the type of investors that we bring to the conversation, really they fall into two categories. There are certainly our artists, arts institutions, foundations that fund in the arts, who are now joining the conversation about impact investing because of the opportunity to align with something where they're passionate and where they have strategic expertise or a clear relationship. A museum investing in the creative economy makes a lot of sense. But similarly, we're trying to showcase the opportunity that the creative economy offers to all impact investors. If you're an investor and you're seeking the highest and best use of your capital, why would you overlook the 5 to 10% of the American economy when you're seeking the best opportunities to make money and do good? And that's what's happening now. Impact investors have not been paying attention to the creative economy and to creative industries in the way that we think that they should. So we're very excited that among the foundations that have committed to invest in our new inclusive creative economy strategy, which is the first national impact investing vehicle for the American creative economy, while we have investors like the Ford Foundation and the Andy Warhol Foundation who actively work in the arts, we also have two foundations that have no interest, no connection to art and culture, but they are persuaded by our impact thesis, and they want to achieve those same impact goals, and they don't want to miss out on the best opportunities in the creative economy when they're trying to achieve those goals. So the impact that we bring to our investors fits along 5 categories. 3 of them are relevant to pretty much every impact investor. Access to capital for women and minorities, opportunities for quality jobs, work that is both meaningful and well compensated, and the opportunity to anchor vibrant communities around creative places and businesses. So those are 3 topics: financial inclusion, workforce, and community development that many impact investors care about. We have 2 impact goals that are very relevant to our focus on creativity. One is sustainable lives and livelihoods for artists, designers, and other creative people. And the second is what we call an inclusive creative economy that respects traditional wisdom and innovation, values diversity and inclusion, and takes an open and experimental approach.
Do I understand correctly that you actually mobilize equity investors? Are those equity investors?
So our strategy will be making equity investments, both directly into seed and early stage companies, and also by investing in funds that are led by women and people of color, where we have seen through our research a very strong correlation where funds that are led by diverse fund managers are frequently well exposed to businesses in creative industries, because we've seen that diverse entrepreneurs are succeeding in the creative industries in the United States. So the funds are focused on investing in women and people of color who are entrepreneurs. The fund managers are not primarily focused on the creative economy. They may not even know that term, but we help to bring that correlation into visibility and activate those fund managers as colleagues and champions for the creative economy.
And what are the main criteria, investment criteria, that they are assessing before committing their funds?
So when investors talk to us, they talk to us first and foremost as investors and impact investors. They want to understand our investment thesis and why we believe we can make money. They assess my team and our investment committee to be sure that we're properly qualified to do this work. They want to understand what's in our investment pipeline and the criteria that we use for sourcing, screening, and qualifying investment opportunities. They want to understand the impact thesis as I just described it and see that it aligns with their impact goals as well. So they're approaching this as they would approach any other investment opportunity. I will say that there are some particular concerns to be sure that artists and designers and creative people are properly benefiting, and that this is not money that will be made off the backs of the creative people. So we do get some questions along those lines. The investors that come to us for this opportunity see it as an important demonstration of what's possible. We're behind the UK. We didn't have a Fran Sanderson who was getting this started earlier and was able to quickly get capital to work. So we're trying to catch up with what's happening in the UK. And the influence strategy that Upstart brings to this conversation, where we're demonstrating what's possible, we will be radically generous sharing the lessons that we learn. Our goal is to motivate wealth advisors to direct their clients' capital to the creative industries and fund managers to prioritize business investment opportunities in the creative industries. So the types of investors who are attracted to this work see it as an important demonstration to de-risk and decipher the creative economy so that more impact investor dollars will come to this space.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. Fran, you're about to become the CEO of an organization that will also try to set up models for funding the creative economy. So how can we actually create the conditions that enable impact investing in the cultural and creative sector?
Thank you. This is a very important question, and one that we cover in our recent report for the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre. But I think from the perspective of doing this for 9 years, there are so many answers to that question. It really is, like Laura says, about building an ecosystem. I think that it's a traditionally underinvested sector, and a lot of that is a knowledge gap from investors. So investors don't really understand how the sector works. They see challenges of scale, for example, and I think they see challenges of replicability, which I guess relates to the challenge of scale. And I think more broadly, there is a lower understanding of existing business models, and the business models are changing very quickly if we look at things like content creation in the creative economy. But that's, of course, the bits we might recognise of the creative economy. Laura has done some really excellent definitional work of how broadly the creative economy spreads, and those definitions are really important. But I think so. One thing is investor education. And I think that's the job that we as impact investors can do, and actually have a really, that's a really exciting opportunity for me, because the broader investment community doesn't really know how to look at this sector as well as they might do other sectors. There's not such a, what did you say, de-risk and decipher? Brilliant, I love that term. There isn't the kind of body of knowledge of how to invest in this sector. So if we can actually proliferate from some of that from the impact investing sector, then you're getting the importance of impact out in a really indirect way to the investment community. So one thing is investor education. I think governments can do a lot to create a supportive policy environment. So whether that's using tools like, guarantees, tax incentives, again, they could be involved in some of that education work, underwriting products, using catalytic capital to support fund structures which can then de-risk for other investors to come in. So I think policymakers can be really helpful as well. And of course, actually, in the UK, while we're quite well developed relatively in this kind of impact investing space, we're facing some real challenges around skills and education in consequence of government policies over the last, let's say, decade. So I think there are, things you have to make sure you're not overlooking as well, and make sure you're keeping those involved. So in terms of having the kind of ecosystem of skills and communities to support. I think that there's a really important role around de-risking and R&D. So certainly in the UK, the creative economy and most creative industries aren't eligible for R&D tax credits in the way that other industries are. So actually, there's a lot less subsidy going into de-risking these models, and there could be really exciting growth models, especially around new content distribution or audience engagement opportunities that aren't getting developed because there isn't the government support for that. And I think that, the culture of experimentation that comes out of that, if you look at, for example, pharma, that's very well established that things will start and fail, and, that's what happens. And I don't think we have that so much, that sort of expectation and enthusiasm and optimism and kind of risk appetite in the creative economy, certainly that's supported. I think another thing that probably organisations in the creative economy would recognise is that there's a kind of lack of infrastructure support. There are a lot of small and medium enterprises in this sector, and it's hard to get the kind of infrastructure you need, so that if there are opportunities for shared services, and it's not a new question. I think that small and medium enterprises in this sector have been working this for a long time, but actually coming at that from an investment angle, where there are there's a big party in investment, a wall of investment capital that's also incentivized to create that. I think that could be really helpful. Private foundations can be really helpful here as well, just because they have so much more flexibility generally in their capital and how they can use that. So whether that's investing directly and showing other organisations, so sort of de-risking at the enterprise level, or de-risking at a fund level, so allowing other more commercial investors to come in. And I think understanding the impact, so making sure that there are initiatives and there's a lot of research and policy work that shows what the impact of this sector is, will certainly help to bring in the impact investors that we, a lot of us in this room, are making the case for the creative economy among impact investors. But it's a very loud and crowded market, and I think any support we can have to do that is really helpful.
So I understand that support comes mainly from policymakers, right? From grants that are essential for the sector. Laura covered equity investing. How about debt? How can we mobilize loans to the creative sector? How can you educate a banker like myself to invest in this sector? How can we mitigate the risks?
Well, I think not to keep banging on about experimentation. I think I'm at heart a sort of spreadsheet geek financial engineer. So, we were talking last night at dinner. I think what we need to be doing is experiment with financial structuring and trying to work out how we can, ultimately raising a fund is a dance around what you want to invest in and what people want to invest in, and trying to pull that string around quite unwieldy assembly. So I think making sure that I think part of that's really what some of the motivation behind Creativity Culture Capital, our shared project, was okay, so what's happening around the world? How are other people doing it? We talk about our friends in Argentina who had a specific tax from the creative industries to fund the arts and culture, and then the Colombian orange bond that was issued. So I think thinking about, okay, who's here with capital? What does that capital need? How can we fit those things together? Where's the intersection that works for everybody? And some of that is obviously going to be particular to certain geographies or particular to certain markets, and some of it isn't. So some of it is just, trying to find ways of solving the equation. I think for us, we're a mainly debt fund, so we have, we're a fund structure, SPV that has a grant in it, and then we have two layers of debt. So we have junior debt and senior debt, and so it's almost like a CDO, except someone has the highest risk and the lowest returns. So it's not traditional in that way, but it is a pilot project, a demonstration project, and then as we scale up, that piece does become more attractive. And that's really just about the mathematics of how the debt works and the cash flows work, because you have limited upside in debt funds, because we're making as I said earlier, we're investing mainly in charitable structures. So really, we can only make debt investments. Actually, we can only make debt investments because that's our investment guidelines, but we don't have many opportunities to make equity investments. But there is a huge opportunity more broadly in the sector to be doing impact in equity impact investing. And then if we were to raise that fund, we would say, okay, here's the mathematics on the front end, here are our kind of return expectations and profiling, and how we would fund that on the back end depends more about what capital, what risk return profile people, the investors that we're talking to would want to take. So there might be a debt opportunity in there, for example.
And what is the risk appetite?
The risk, well, that really varies from investor to investor. So we have we have 3 funds. They're broadly similar. I won't go into the details here, but it's all online if you would like to look. So we would have the party with the greatest risk appetite in each case is a public funder. So they are using money that otherwise would have gone out, would have lost 100%. So for them, it's all upside. If what they can do is put that in a structure and that leverages in more money. So in our first fund, we had £3 million of repayable grants, and that leveraged in $4 million in debt. In the second fund, we had $5 million, and that leveraged in $18 million in debt. So really for them, it's very attractive because that would have been $5 million out to the sector, but now it's $23 million out to the sector. Not only that, but you're changing behavior in the sector by advancing a different kind of instrument to the sector, and that does affect behavior change in the organization. You might ask why they wouldn't try and pilot that themselves first. It is because what you need to develop is that investing infrastructure, which the public funders don't have, and they don't have capacity to develop.
Wow. I must say that I find these models very, very interesting. And actually the question I have for both of you is, how can we replicate these models in Europe or elsewhere?
So it does require a champion, an individual or a small organization who can work in a cross-sector fashion and engage government where that's the appropriate partner, that is able to knowledgeably talk to investors. You can't just have an aspiration around impact and a love of arts and culture and creativity. If you're bringing forward an investment proposition, you actually need to have investment expertise, training, track record. At least some portion of the team that's bringing this forward needs to be legitimately viewed as a qualified investment professional and expert. And I do think it's important to, as I said, follow that 3-part recipe of making the case through data, research, pilots, and demonstrations, building as broad of a coalition as possible that will welcome both existing impact investors, existing art lovers into the conversation and be ready to convert to a commitment to the creative economy, impact investors that are not that interested in culture and creativity but want to find the best investable opportunities to make money and do good, as well as strategically aligned artists, art collectors, arts organizations who can bring that strategic expertise and hopefully some capital and passion to the equation. And then lastly, having the conversations, it's an important starting point, but it's insufficient. You've got to make mobilizing capital the focus of the work. This is not just an advocacy exercise. And so whether that's leveraging existing instruments and working with existing investment partners, as we did early on, cooperating with we were 2 years old, but we were cooperating with an organization that was 30 years old, had a national reach, and was AA rated. So we worked with this partner organization, and they used their existing note product to raise capital for investors and direct that to affordable housing for artists and affordable shared workspaces for creative economy businesses. And that proved to be an important pilot to show that if you built the right investment instrument, art-loving impact investors and other impact investors would come. So that was an important demonstration, but we knew that we couldn't stop there, that we needed to have something that was fully dedicated and within the control of the Upstart team as the ultimate vehicle that we're trying to build.
And I would just say, coming from my position previously at Big Society Capital and looking at the incredible effect that having a social investment wholesaler has had on the market in the UK and the leverage that that has brought. And both of us, having spent the bulk of probably our time in our current roles fundraising and, really wearing out our shoe leather, going around trying to raise money, more for Laura, because I'm lucky enough to have a cornerstone investor, just really understanding that when you're trying to raise a new fund, having someone behind you that is, your fund product is underwritten or cornerstoned essentially, delivers vast efficiencies and vast leverage. So if there were a wholesale body that was focused on the creative economy, not only does that make our jobs easier in terms of fundraising, it also becomes a kind of central repository for that shared learning. So the stuff that we're trying to do sort of synthetically via creativity, culture and capital, if you had a global wholesaler that was sitting there seeing all of the intermediaries globally, understanding how they were using that wholesale capital, that's actually a real kind of foundry for that experimentation that I'm talking about. And it doesn't need to be, that's not forgivable capital. That we've shown that capital can be returned with a financial return. So all it really needs to be is patient and risk friendly. So a sort of central source, 100 million that could be deployed to local intermediaries to support building a market, I think would be a huge step forward for impact investing in this sector.
We have 3 minutes until the end of our session, so I want a closing remark from both of you. What is next for arts and culture finance?
Well, I can tell you what's next for us in the United States. Last week, we had the first close on our national inclusive creative economy strategy. We have $15 million committed to this approach, which we're very excited about. It's only the first close, so we have to continue to wear out our shoe leather, raising money between now and December of 2024. So that's certainly on the agenda. Our investment committee has already approved the first 2 investments that we'll make, and I was looking at all the busy things my staff has been doing while I've been out of the country for the last week, and it looks like we've signed the investment documents on the first investment, so the money has come to us, and immediately we're putting it out into the creative economy, which is very exciting. We will continue to source and screen and diligence additional investments to absorb the dedicated capital to this strategy. We are convening for the first time in June an advisory group of artists and impact investors who will be a touchstone to the Upstart team to ensure that we are keeping the goals and the needs of artists top of mind as we identify and select the investments that we'll be making. And as I said before, we will be radically generous sharing what we learn throughout this process. So we are already thinking about the impact report and what we will include to share our insights and learnings a year from now.
And we are, so my job is partly doing this and partly very intense legal negotiations about the spin out from Nesta, so very granular and very big picture, but we're very excited about launching as an independent not-for-profit in June called Figurative. So yeah, huge props to my team who actually do the work that I talk about, exactly the same stuff Laura's talking about, sourcing investments, processing those, going through to legal completion, monitoring the investments, working with our investees. We're very much a kind of relationship-based investor, but also thinking about how we can support innovation programs, so making sure that R&D piece is done, so that there are new models coming through the pipeline, doing research, doing some international advisory work, which again will be on this theme, and making sure that the core of that will be to create this kind of hub of shared knowledge across the world to support this bigger goal of trying to mobilize a lot of this impact investing capital into the creative economy.
Super. Thank you so much, both of you. We had a very interesting discussion. At least for me, it was also very educational. I hope that you all enjoyed it, and thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thank you, Despina.